name is Miguel Myers. Welcome to my horror confessional, where every week I will have a guest come on and talk about one classic horror movie that they haven't seen and why. We'll discuss the movie, the actors, and probably get off topic quite a bit. Once I believe that they have properly atoned, I will absolve them of their horror movie sin. Today we have Victoria Nations. Victoria writes horror stories and poetry about creatures with emotional baggage. Her most recent work appears in Insomnio, a collection of modern Gothic horror, a quaint and curious volume of Gothic tales, the Magpie Messenger literary magazine, and the upcoming Mother, Tales of Love and Terror. Victoria is a member of the Horror Writers Association, the Science Fiction Poetry Association, and the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Association. She lives in Florida with her wife and son who indulge her love of monsters. Victoria, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, really quick, I read your story after Krampusnacht in the book Gothic Blue Book Volume 6, A Krampus Carol, that I
Yeah.
actually picked up at Ghoulish Fest where we first met. And I just wanted to tell you that so I read it to my wife. My wife and I read it last night, and it was so much fun. So
Oh,
great job
good.
on that story.
Oh, thanks so much. That was a lot of fun to write.
Yeah, and so I wasn't aware that there was all these so Krampus is a fairly new thing to me.
Hmm.
I don't believe I knew of Krampus until the movie came out. And
Hmm.
then ever since then, like I've seen like this explosion of Krampus. And so I was just wondering, is Krampus something that you grew up knowing about, or is it sort of later in life sort of thing?
I think, when I was, even from when I was a little kid, I was always drawn to like the creepy myths and legends. So I think I heard about Krampus a long time ago, but it was always something that was like in the past. It was over, in Europe, and it wasn't anything local. But yeah, you're right. It just seems like Krampus has really caught on. There's Krampusnacht celebrations every year. We even have one coming up in Florida that I saw this year. So it seems like Krampus is spreading. And when I wrote the story, I just was very excited about this idea of Krampus spreading, like the legend has been kind of catching hold of popular culture and being in my local beach town and what that would look like.
Yeah, it was so good because even in the story you mentioned that um, in so many words. I don't know if I have it directly, but that
Yeah.
typically Krampus is found in snowier climes or colder climes, and this story takes place in Florida, and it's basically about a woman who believes in the real Krampus and
Hmm.
not so much the corporate Krampus or the nice Krampus that others believe in. Kind of like the story of the real Santa Claus or the like Saint Nick versus the Coca Cola Santa Claus that we have now.
Exactly.
And yeah, and she like it's a story about I don't want to give too much away because the story's cool, but it's kind of the story about this woman whose lover goes missing, and she's kind of relating that story to a coworker, and yeah, it kind of goes in a different direction than you think, and it's just so great. And I love the writing style you had, where a lot of it for this character, a lot of her story was told in smell, right? In the
Mhm.
senses of the smell that she was picking up and wherever she was. And is that something typical with your writing?
I think I don't know. I think like the stories of Krampus and in that Gothic Blue book, which is the Krampus edition. It's all winter legends. There are so many smells of winter and the holidays we think about, and even in the colder climes, that smell of snow. But so I was thinking a lot about just the smells that surround you in the winter holidays, whether it be spices, whether it be fire, and what that would look like in a beach settings. And yeah, I think that's a big part of writing about in a Gothic tradition is really making the surroundings feel almost claustrophobic and immersive. And I really like trying to create that.
Yeah, you did a great job. My wife and I
Thanks.
we both loved it last night. Like we were in bed, like under the covers. We're like, "Ooh, that's creepy. That's great." So, what has been your history with horror, be it um, horror fiction or horror movies? I guess let's start with fiction. Like, did
Mhm,
you always know that you wanted to be a horror writer? The reason why I asked is because my guest last week, RJ Joseph,
mhm,
actually in our conversation, it came out that she was actually a romance writer, and she got her MFA in romance, which I thought
mhm.
was very interesting, and I could see that in her story. So that's why I was wondering, did you always want to be a horror writer, or did it start somewhere else?
First, props for having Rhonda on. And Rhonda and I geek out all the time about how close romance and horror are because
Yeah.
they're such visceral emotions. I think I liked creepy things from birth, and but I had a family that really enjoyed old horror movies and liked reading some horror. You know, there was Stephen King in the house, there was Peter Straub in the house, and there was a horror host we used to have that was out of the Tampa area called Dr. Paul Bearer. And so,
Oh, I
you know,
love
every
that.
Saturday we would get together and watch the what he called the horrible old movies. And so, really, from when I was a little kid, I loved reading horror and watching horror. And you know, it wasn't until older that I kind of thought, hey, maybe this is something I could do myself. I mean, I always liked writing stories, but then you know, kind of really more until I was a teen that I kind of started dabbling in it. And then only into adulthood that I really got brave enough to, you know, write it and put it out there and really stretch my wings. But I've just loved it my entire life.
Nice. It's great to hear. Were there any books from your childhood that you kind of saw as like a guiding light, something that you kind of still
Mhm.
fall back on that you think, that really helped me on my journey?
You know, I started reading Edgar Allan Poe
Mm,
because my family knew that I liked writing horror or reading horror, and so that, you know, they put that in my hands early. And I think Poe still influences me to this day. And then, of course, Stephen King as well. But what I really dug was at a garage sale once, my folks got the entire edition, all the editions of Man, Myth, and Magic, which is one of those like Time Life books you could get, like a
okay.
series. They send you a book, and it was all the different, you know, there's psychic stuff, there's legend stuff, there's monster stuff. And I devoured those as a kid. And I just think all of that historical, you know, stories and creatures have kind of seeped into my work.
Wow, that sounds really man, myth, and legend. Is that what
Yep,
it's called?
man, myth, and magic.
And magic.
And every once in a while, I check eBay, and I don't make enough money now to be able to buy the old man, myth, and magic. But someday, I'm going to have those books again.
Yeah, that sounds really. I got to look those up. Hopefully, maybe somebody's put them online and we could just read them like that. That'd be great.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
So, as far as horror movies, was your family the same way, where they kind of helped you along your way, like showing you horror movies, or is that something that you found separately?
There was very much something we watched together. I mean, we watched the old classic ones, which again, I'm shocked how Black Sunday, what we're talking about today, I somehow missed it. But we watched a lot of those old Hammer horror, and then as the '70s horror, like, you know, The Omen, and you know, and Rosemary's Baby. Those were all
Mhm.
things that I watched with my parents for the first
Oh, that is great. That is so amazing.
time.
Was there anything off limits?
No, but you know,
You
yeah,
didn't really.
no, no. And that was actually really good because I think I kind of took in the level of media that I was ready for, like at each age, you know.
Mhm. What do you think? I don't have any children, but my friends around me are starting to have kids and stuff like that, and they're getting 2, 3 years old. And what do you think is the age where children can start seeing horror movies? Because for me, like,
Yeah.
I probably saw the movie Halloween when I was like 3 years old. I'm not
Mhm.
saying that that's the perfect age or whatever. Was
Yeah.
just my experience. So I was just wondering what you think of.
You know, I think it depends on the kid. I personally, as a general rule, feel like kids ask for the media that they're ready for. So,
Mm,
like, if you show, you know, if a little kid wants to watch something spooky, but they're not enjoying it, well, then that's just not their thing, or they're not ready for it. But generally, kids kind of know what they're ready for. And like you said, some of us were reading Stephen King or watching Halloween very young, and it was delightful. It wasn't ever anything that was bad or off-putting. But other kids would be terrified and wouldn't be able to sleep. So you just, I mean, if you have a little kid that's drawing monsters and wanting to read, the baby edition of Dracula, I say give it to them and, let them enjoy it.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Um, so, so it sounds like your family was really open about with like horror literature and also movies and stuff like that. How about your friend circle? Did you have friends who were into it as well?
I did. I used to have horror movie sleepovers, and I used to have a big
Wow.
sleepover Halloween party.
Victoria,
And
I am so jealous right now. You lived the life that I wanted.
wait, I will make you even more jealous in that I still have a core group of friends that I've known since I was 11, and one of us, what I call her my horror movie friend. She and I have now been having horror movie sleepovers for 40 years, and
Oh, that's beautiful. I have a tear in my eye here.
yes, we still get together a few times a year and like go to one of our houses and we try to stay up as late as we can. We can't stay up as late as we used to. And but we do and we watch horror movies around the clock and we just make time for that.
Yeah, that sounds like the dream right there for me. Like if I could, yeah, I think I'd be okay if I had a friend like that for 40 years, That's amazing.
Mhm.
Yeah. As a do you guys like theme them? Like this year we're gonna do gothic horror or like last year we did slashers, that sort of thing?
We sometimes we do and sometimes we don't. We did a couple years ago we did it was Christmas time and we said we're going to do all holiday horror and I think we did a clown theme once. Um and but and then sometimes we're like okay, we need to see some classics and that I think we're gearing up for that for our next one that we want to kind of come up with a list of very much like you have on your your my horror confessional is kind of like what haven't we seen
Mhm.
that we should see, you know.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. Do you guys challenge yourselves hey, we have to see this particular movie even though it's got like a I'm thinking of like shoot. Like some of the torture porn movies like let's say Saw. Like what do you
Yeah.
or not specifically Saw, but like do you guys challenge yourselves or do you like rewatch oldies? Like you were saying just now, I guess that you're starting to watch movies you haven't seen, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes we do. I mean, but like, like Martyrs. I will admit I've not seen Martyrs.
Martyrs. Okay, yeah,
I
that's a
know the
perfect
story of
example.
Martyrs. I think it sounds brilliant,
Mm,
but it's not something that's going to probably sit well with me. And so that's okay if I don't see it. And I kind of think it's like that. I don't,
mhm.
I think everybody's got their personal tastes and not everybody's going to want their own thing. And, I mean, like I'm a mom, and so anything that has to do with like child abduction is like way scarier for me than say Halloween.
Yeah.
So everybody's kind of got their thing. But we try to say like, okay, we should watch this. It would be good for us.
Yeah, I find myself like I'm a lifelong horror fan and a lot of stuff like I've been desensitized to,
Hmm.
but there is some stuff that like if I have issues with, so for example, like I have a touch of claustrophobia. And so is actually speaking of this, at the Ghoulish Book Fest in San Antonio where we met
Hmm.
earlier this year, do you know that that elevator? Did you get in that elevator?
Yes, I did.
That small ass elevator?
And it seems like it's not gonna work because it's kind of yeah,
And
it's
it's
like
so
this big.
slow. Like the building was built in like the 20s or something like that. Amazing building, beautiful building, but they need to replace that elevator, just close it off because I got there early. I mean, I helped set up the audio for the fest for Max, and we got there with my equipment, and I didn't realize the elevator. And I just walked in, and then myself and another friend, Zach Chapman, who was there as well,
Okay.
we just walked in with all this equipment into the elevator, and then the door closed. I'm like, holy shit, it's so small in here, and I almost had a panic. Like I've never been close to a panic attack except for that
Yeah.
moment. And Zach was just like talking my ear off, and in my mind, I'm screaming, "Shut the fuck up! Shut the fuck up!" Because like I'm starting to sweat and everything. So we got out of the doors open, and I just burst out of there. I'm like, I am not taking that elevator again. I am not. And so for the rest of the fest, I was just taking the stairs up and down, even with
Hmm.
my equipment. Like what I did is, when we were loading out, I put the equipment in, pressed the button, and then walked down the stairs because that claustrophobia is not a joke. But so
No,
anything dealing with like claustrophobia really sets me off. So
right.
the descent,
Oh yeah, which is brilliant.
absolutely amazing film, and I can watch it, but like my skin is crawling the whole
Yeah.
time, you know. So it's just it's fun to kind of like, and I just finding I just saw the Descent, maybe what's it been like 10 years ago or whatever when it came
Yeah.
out, and I'm almost 40 years old, so I'm still like finding things that really frighten me, you know.
Hmm.
So just I thought that was really fascinating. So um, in your writing, do you find that you have particular things that you go back to? Like,
Hmm.
is there a certain, like, do all your stories take place in Florida, or are they all like kind of gothic, or do you kind of are your influences kind of vast?
I I've a lot of my stories have to do or have as a theme kind of in the natural world. In my day job, I'm a biologist. I'm a field biologist by training, and so I've spent a whole lot of time in swamps and in lakes and with wild creatures and and things like that. And so I actually have a deep love for that. But it also can be extremely spooky in certain areas, and so I find that the natural world comes in a lot. Um, Either as just a setting or even as a character, kind of encroaching on you, talking about claustrophobia, and and then I say I write about things with emotional baggage, and that I find that familial or interpersonal relationships show up a lot, because I think that a lot of our fears can be external, a lot of our fears can be internal, and I think that shows up a lot as well.
Okay.
That, and I have a tendency to write about female characters or non-binary characters, just because I those are the voices that speak to me the most.
I am very interested in what you think of the female characters in this, well, female character in
Uh-huh.
this movie.
I
Um,
have opinions.
good, thank you. So, why do you feel? So, you said a little bit earlier that you know you saw the classics and the Hammer horrors with your parents. Um, do you have an inkling of why this particular movie passed you by? Like, had you not heard of it, or was it on your list and you never got to it? That sort of thing.
I almost wonder if I truly do not know, because this is something I would have seen from my old horror movie host, Dr. Paul Bearer. I feel like I have seen Isa's face, the witch's face with the pockmarks. I have seen this in horror media like my entire life. I almost feel like I'd never connected her face and Barbara Steele's face to the title. It
Mm.
just somehow, because I feel like I've seen her, and it's such a striking image, but somehow it just slipped by me. I was either watching the Hammer horror lesbian vampires, or I'm watching the Mushroom People. Somehow I never quite interacted with her.
Yeah, and to be fair, like if you try to connect her face to the title, like the title doesn't go
No.
with this movie, and we even see the version I saw on Shutter has a different title for it.
The Mask
Um,
of Satan.
the Mask of Satan, which
Yeah.
is first of all an amazing name for a movie,
Hmm.
way better than Black Sunday. They don't even mention Sunday in the movie, so
No.
whatever. But okay, so this has just kind of passed you by, and that makes sense. Sometimes that just happens. I had seen this movie for the first time maybe over a decade ago, and I remember really enjoying it, but it was basically a brand new movie to me because I didn't remember too much about it other than like the premise, like
Hmm.
so. I really enjoyed this one. So, before we get started talking about it, would you mind letting my listeners know how they could find you on social media, or how they can support you, how they can buy your books, all that sort of stuff?
Oh yeah, thank you for asking for that. So my website is victorianations.com. Best place to find all my stuff. I'm on all the social medias, I guess. Facebook is like a reposting of stuff that's elsewhere. So you'll find me mostly on Twitter, and I'm at leaves underscore cobwebs. And I'm also the same on Instagram. So Twitter and Instagram, I'm both on there. And then on my website, you can find all of the different books that I'm in and, links to purchase them.
Nice. Do you have anything coming out that we should be looking for, or anything that you're working on?
Yeah, actually, I would love to pitch the Mother Tales of Love and Terror. It's got an amazing table of contents. The contributing author list is really amazing. So that's from Wicked Little Worlds. It is Mother Tales of Love and Terror, and I think it's just going to be a really tremendous anthology. It's coming out technically in April, but if you order now, you'll actually get it a little bit cheaper, and you'll get it in October in time for Halloween.
Oh, nice. That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
You don't have to wait till April. That you get it for like 6 months earlier than everybody
Yeah.
else. That's great.
So don't know when this is coming out, but
Uh,
if there's still
2 weeks.
time, go ahead and
It'll be like
order.
2 weeks. Yeah.
After you asked me all those questions about myself, I have all these questions about you too, like how you got into horror and stuff. But I'm like, oh
Okay.
wait, I'm supposed to be the one who's the guest. But
Yeah, I mean, we can wait till the end, or we can do it now, and I can cut it in, or however you want to handle it.
I mean, the same kind of questions because it was so good to meet you at Ghoulish Book Fest, and I sense that you guys, you and Zach, and like that people who kind of knew each other, but of course I was new to everybody except for
Uh-huh.
I mean, folks I had known online. So it just was kind of delightful to see the community you guys seem to have.
Yeah, Max and Lori put on a great book festival, Ghoulish Book Festival in San Antonio. They're going to be doing it again next year.
I'll be there.
April, May. Oh, awesome! Great. I'll see you there as
Yeah.
well. And yeah, Max and myself and Zach Chapman and Andrew Hilbert were all friends. We're really close friends, and
Yeah.
so we helped Max. Like, don't get me wrong, him and Lori did 99% of the work for the whole festival. But the day of, we helped him set up and do audio and other sorts of things. But yeah, so we also had our own table. Zach and I were selling a comic book that we wrote together, and
Mhm.
Andrew was selling his books because he's an author as well. And so it was just everybody that we met there. Like the majority, I think so far, everybody that I've had on this season, including yourself, have been from Ghoulish Book Festival. People I've met there, and it's just the community that was there. The people that were there were just so friendly and willing
Yeah.
to help everybody, and were just so cool, and was just like into everything that we were into.
Hmm.
Like horror comics and horror literature and like just dope ass shit. And including yourself and Rhonda and Eve, like all everybody that met is I was really excited for having on the show, and still like later on, like I'm gonna have Susan Snyder, who wrote Encyclopedia Sharksploitanica, which is
Yes.
absolutely amazing. And then I'm having on, a couple more people. Like basically, this season is just people that I met
Yeah.
at the festival. So yeah, I had tons of fun. It sounds like you did as well.
I did. I was, I have family in San Antonio, and they actually came by on Saturday of the festival, and but they're not horror people, but because I was like, they won't be scary, I promise. Horror people are actually like really normal, like friendly people. But so I was kind of like, oh yeah, new horror festival, and I got family in town. It's a great, so that's kind of like how I got into it, and I liked the kind of stuff Max does, and so that's why I wanted to go to the first one and have a table and be on panels and stuff. I was blown away. I mean, I was blown away by the community y'all have together and just everybody it attracted. I've just, I don't, I keep trying to explain to people just how positive and into horror reading and writing people were. Cause I've been to horror conventions and everybody loves horror, but to have actually people really into the story element of it was just exceptional. And then all of the attendees were the same way, like everybody was just geeking out over the same thing and just so positive. And we were all sending people table to table, if somebody was looking for comics and we don't have comics, I mean, it just I, I I don't know. I've just never been in something that had quite that great of vibes to it. Um,
Yeah,
I, yeah, that's
yeah.
why I immediately wanted to go back.
Yeah, same. I'm really looking forward to it. But I
Yeah.
agree. It was a great environment. You no doubt, because of the type of people that Lori and Max are, like, you like attracts like, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, and it was just a fun time, and I think next year is going to be even better as it expands. I think, if I'm remembering correctly, it's going to be 3 days this time,
Yeah,
as
I think it's
opposed
gonna
to
be
last
Friday,
year's.
Saturday, and Sunday.
Yeah, and the smart thing that Max did was to make the was it bookstore, or the place where all the sales floor, make it free for everybody to come in.
Yes.
And then if you wanted to attend panels, then that's when you would buy a ticket. So because they were in downtown San Antonio, people who were just walking by would just walk in. And whereas
Mhm.
before, they would, if it's another convention, they'd be told they have to buy a ticket or whatever. And
Mhm.
you don't want to spend that initial investment and then go in and probably not buy anything. I've been in that situation
Mhm.
before. People just were, it was free to walk in, so they felt more free to spend money there. You know, on
Mhm.
something like, if it takes $10 to get in, you're like, well, maybe they could have spent that $10 at a table, which they did, and more.
Yeah.
There was multiple people who bought multiple things at each table. Like, I saw them going by each table picking something up. So yeah, I think they
Yeah.
just did a great job with that.
Yeah, and so I really enjoyed meeting folk, like meeting you and meeting folks I had not met before. I there were, I mean, Cena and Laurel and, and Eve, like I had interacted online with them before, but like I had no introduction to you before, and you're delightful. I mean,
Thank
it
you.
just, and the people you guys hang out with are just, I don't know. I just like when people are they're creating good stuff and they've got a great attitude and everybody's lifting everybody up and we all just kind of like the same thing. It was pretty awesome.
Same. So if you're listening to this and you want to be part of that, head on down to San Antonio. It's going to be like in April, May. Do you remember the dates? Is it in?
It's like April 15th
Yeah,
weekend. Yeah.
no worries. You'll hear about it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have more guests come out from there, and so, like, I've had Laurel was on before the book fest, and so was Cena. Like, on my first season,
Mhm.
they're awesome. They're amazing. So, and I got to pick up
Mhm.
Cena from the airport, so, like, we got to talk. That was the first time I met her. Like, she was a guest
Yeah.
on my show before that, and then I picked her up at the airport. So it was kind of cool.
Well,
But
and shout out to Cena. So Cena and Barda, her husband, are the ones who have Burial Day Books Publishing, and they're the ones who published that Gothic Blue Book VI that you were referring to my
really, I
story
was
being
not
in.
aware of
Yeah, they're
that.
the publishers of that.
Okay, and she recently sold her book, Children of Chicago, and hopefully
Hmm.
that's going to be made. I forget if it's a TV show or a movie that it's going to be turned into. Hopefully, but yeah, she's really great. I did not know that that was her company. Now I got to look into that.
Yeah,
No.
yeah. I think as she's, as her writing is really, taken off. I mean, I don't. It's not. I get the feeling she's writing and Garrett's doing all the is having to do with a bunch of the publishing stuff. But all of the volumes of Gothic Blue Book have been just really gorgeous volumes to own. So I was pretty excited to be able to get into one of them.
Well,
So.
after we finish reading your book, because like every reader, I have a stack, like stacks of books all around my house that I haven't read. In fact, yesterday my wife and I had a date where we went to the bookstore and just, like, picked up like 5 or 6 books each, and we're like, "Is this too many books? Nah, it's not too many books." And so, like, but your book was on in one of those stacks, or I'm sorry, the book in which your story appeared was on
Hmm.
one of those stacks. And so I was like, well, I have to read that. I want to read this before we talk. And so my wife and I read it last night, and like I said, and we enjoyed it so much. And I'm like, I want to save this book for winter. I want to save it for around Christmas time and read these around then.
Hmm.
Well, she's like, well, it's coming up October. I'm like, yeah, but I don't know. I'm from Chicago originally, and I want to feel like that
Oh, okay.
that coldness that comes in from, like, winter stories. And even, like, in your story that you imbued, even though we're in Florida, I still felt a chill, while
Mm.
you're going through your story. So yeah, that's a great book. If
Thanks.
anybody thinking about where to pick up one of your stories, that's one of my recommendations. Thank you for all the kind words. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
So today you have come on to confess your horror sin that you've never seen the movie Black Sunday. Is that correct?
Yes, I confess.
Thank you.
My wife is Catholic, and so I had to explain to her the premise of this podcast, and she was giggling.
Yeah, I'm a lapsed Catholic, former Catholic,
Okay.
now atheist. So that's where
Yeah,
that's where
she calls herself recovering Catholic.
yeah, exactly. So Black Sunday from 1960 was directed by Mario Bava, who is a legend. He's an Italian horror movie director who's done tons of horror movies, done Bay of Blood, Lisa and the Devil, and of course Black Sunday. And it was written by, and I apologize for killing these names, Ennio de Concini or Concini, Mario Sarandre, and actually it's From a Tale by Nikolai Gogol, which I thought was really interesting. My wife really likes Nikolai Gogol. And so
Mhm.
when we were watching it yesterday and saw that it was From a Tale by him, she was like, "Really? Okay." So that was kind of interesting to find out. But it does star Barbara Steele in a dual role as Princess Aza. And these names, I apologize. I'm going to try to say them correctly as well. But Princess Aza Vaja, and also she plays Katya, who is also Princess Vaja, right? But it's either Aja or Katya. And it's also starring Andrea Cecchi as Dr. Kruvayan and John Richardson as Dr. Gorbek and Arturo Dominici as Igor Yavutic. Russian is not my first language or my second or third, so it's kind of difficult to say these names. But so the movie starts with flames, and as we pull out, we see these two beefy muscle men with executioner's hoods. I was like, oh, we're starting off kinky. That's fine with me. And so we're in Russia in the 1630s, and one of the beefy executioners has a brand in the fire. And then we hear a narrator say, in the 17th century, Satan was abroad on the earth, and great was the wrath against those monstrous beings thirsting for human blood, to whom tradition has given the name of vampires. No appeal for pity or mercy availed. Brothers did not hesitate to accuse brothers, and fathers accused sons, in the frantic attempt to purify of that horrible race of blood devouring assassins. But before putting them to death, human justice anticipated divine judgment by burning into the flesh those damned ones, the brand of Satan. And I thought that's some dope ass shit to say to start off the movie.
It is.
It really gets you in the mood, right?
It is. And the setting is just amazing. It's like high contrast and like you said, these like people in hoods and terrifying executioners and
And it's in black and white,
yeah.
which already puts you in the mood for like, I don't know, otherworldly shit.
Mhm.
And then you feel already like you're in a gothic vibe sort of thing. So
Absolutely.
it really gets you ready for what's going to come next. While this is being narrated, we see a dozen or so hooded figures holding torches, standing around a woman tied to a stake. Her back is to us, and we see the brand burn the mark of the devil into her flesh. And this effect still holds up. It actually stays on the shot of the burning skin for a lot longer than I anticipated and made me cringe a bit.
Yeah. I agree. I wasn't sure if it was wax because you see this hot brand and it's like pushing into it.
Yeah.
And it's super close up. And they do that a few times in the movie really effectively, where skin just kind of seems to give way and you're like, ah.
Yeah. I mean, I say it later on, but this movie is over 60 years old.
Hmm.
And the effects that are in it are better than some of the CGI shit that you see still today, you know?
Absolutely.
And like, yes, when you're looking at it, you're like, okay, that's a close up of fake skin, like wax. But
Hmm.
still, like the idea of it, it looks a lot better than some CGI rendered stuff. And don't get me wrong, like I'm fine with CGI when it's used right and all that, but
Hmm.
cheap CGI really takes you out of a movie, you know?
Yeah, and the practical effects overall in this movie I thought were really effective. That combination of black and white and a really high contrast, and then the effects are really terrifying sometimes.
Yeah, they have
Yeah.
special effects like makeup, but also they do in-camera effects, which is
Hmm.
real cool. Mario Bava actually started as a cinematographer before he
Oh.
before he started directing, and that's where he learned a lot of techniques. So we'll
Oh,
see later on, like when Princess Aja is coming back to life, you see like superimposed over her face other images and stuff like that. That's
that
actually done
transformation.
exactly, and that's done in camera. So it's really cool. And then we finally see her face. We see Princess Aja, beautiful, dark-haired young woman, obviously played by Barbara Steele.
Hmm.
She's being condemned for practicing witchcraft. And I was just gonna say, like Barbara Steele's eyes are kind of like the star of this movie.
Hmm.
Like she has these huge like globe like eyes that just draw you in to her, you know.
Yes,
And it's actually used to some effect later on when she's hypnotizing people, or yeah, I guess hypnotizing people.
absolutely. She looks crazed too. She
Yes.
just, she somehow, they get huge and she just looks absolutely deranged. It's wonderful.
Yeah, like I'm sure this is 1960, and I'm sure like she's beautiful, and I'm sure she was like
Hmm.
cast for her beauty. But I wonder like if while they were casting beautiful women, they're like, we need to get a woman who has like these huge eyes, you know.
Yes.
The Grand Inquisitor is none other than her estranged brother, Prince Abijah, who renounces his ties to his sister, condemning and repudiating her, which I love that word. He goes on to say that she's done too much evil in the name of love for the devil's serf, Igor Yavutich.
Hmm.
Oh my God. I'm going to be messing up that name all recording, and I apologize now to anybody who's like listening and is like, it's oh my God, Yavutich. Okay, so I apologize in advance. We see Igor tied to the stake with a mask over his face, presumably dead already. As the executioner ties her down to the stake, Aja defiantly swears retribution by saying she's going to return from the dead one day and cursing his children and their children's children. And the way that Barbara Steele says Satan is my favorite. She's like, Satan?
And then the thunder crashes. Boom, boom, boom.
Yes, and it's a bit cheesy, but still it's so good, you know? It's so much fun. Like you have fun watching this movie. You know, at least I did. I don't know about you. Was it a fun
Yeah,
watch?
absolutely. And I was cheering for Asa throughout because she steals every scene she's in.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And she's so my wife had watched this movie when I first watched it over a decade ago. So she wasn't up to it yesterday. So she started in the beginning and then she came back towards the end. And she was like, "Was she just persecuted the whole movie?" And I'm like, "No, actually, this is the first time we see Princess Aja. Like, she's been kind of out of it the whole movie."
Hmm.
And I was like, "I kind of wish I had more of her." You know, like
Hmm.
Katya's
Hmm.
fine, but Katya is like the damsel in distress sort of thing, and it's like, we've seen it a billion times before, and it's really not interesting. The better character is Princess Aja, right?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I'll talk more about Katya as we go on, but oh yeah,
Yeah,
Asa all the way.
exactly. So it's kind of like a good for her movie, you know, like you want her to
Yeah.
win. It doesn't end up being good for her because we'll get there, but you kind of like we're rooting for her.
Hmm.
So then the executioner positions a spike lined metal mask over her face, and this is the mask of Satan. On her brother's command, a swift hammer blow drives the mask into her skull, killing her instantly, and we see blood squirt out. This is
Hmm.
fucking brutal. This is 1960.
It is, yeah. And I mean, it's they show you the mask with the spikes facing you, and then they make the mask walk to the camera, so it's like it's coming onto your face. It's
Yeah,
really effective.
yeah, it's really, really well done. And like, I can't say it enough. Like, 62 years old, and it's like, it's still like effectively giving us good scares, you know?
Yes.
Um, so like within a matter of like a minute, we get two really brutal scenes. Like she's tortured. Like we get the branding and then this.
Hmm.
And this is one of those movies where you get like a lot of scares, a lot of stuff up front, and then it's just in the middle. We're kind of building up to things, you know.
Hmm.
So if I have anything bad to say about the movie, it's that the middle half after the scene is a bit slow,
Hmm.
right? And so I found myself, because I was tired. I tend to watch this movie two or three times, or I tend to watch movies for the show two or three times, depending on how much time I have, just to like I can watch it and take notes and stuff like that. And yesterday, for my last watch of it, I kind of found myself falling or nodding off a little bit because it was just a
Mhm.
little bit slow. But and I'm fine with that. I love slow burns. Like slow burns are some of my favorite horror movies. But just in this particular movie, there's some slow things. So that's maybe one mark against it. So
Yeah.
I don't know. How did you feel about like this the middle half coming up or the middle part of the movie coming up here?
I had the same feeling in that, and you talk about kind of that soggy middle in a book sometimes, but I also felt like there was a lot of characters. So
Mm,
even, 2/3 of the way through the movie, we're suddenly introduced to like the priest. It's kind of like there's a lot of villagers, there's family, and there's the past, and there's the present, and so I think that was the thing too is you don't have as many reveals like in the middle of it, so therefore it's not as startling. There's a couple really great shots, but then the story itself is kind of it drags a little bit.
yeah. But
Yeah.
I was gonna say that the mask looks great too. It looks really, really cool. Like I would put that on my wall. Like I would love to have
Oh yeah.
a replica of that. And then we see the title card with the original title, Mask of Satan, which we talked about is honestly
Hmm.
a lot better of a title. Over the credits, we see that they tried to burn her body at the stake, but it started raining heavily, so they instead interred her in her family crypt in a coffin that was equipped with a window through which the sign of the cross is visible.
Hmm.
With the cross forever visible to her lifeless body, it is thought that the witch will never return to life. And then Javutich is buried in a grave in the murderer section of the cemetery. So here's my question. It rained that night, sure, fine. You couldn't wait. You couldn't like burn her at the stake the next day, something like that.
Yeah,
I
I was wondering if they needed to, like, make her lay still, like, immediately, like, maybe they finally maybe she was kind of controlled enough, but they were afraid she just popped back to life, like, super quick. Because it looks like the mask has got like, there's some holes in it, so theoretically, if the corpse woke up, it could see the cross? I
yeah,
don't know. She's a witch, she's a vampire, later
exactly.
then she's a ghost, it's a little the mythology's a little muddy.
It was unclear. It was like they were drawing from lots of
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. Does not take away from it though.
Right.
It's a delight, but yes.
It leads to like your feeling of uneasiness because you're like,
Yeah.
okay, are we doing witch lore? Are we doing vampire lore here? Like, how are
Mhm.
we going to kill these people? And you're like, you're never too sure. You're on unsure footing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not sure what your weapons would be against something like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A ghost vampire witch. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
So we fast forward 200 years later. Doctors Kureyan and Gorovec are riding in a carriage from St. Petersburg to Moscow on their way to a medical conference. The coachman wants to avoid the shortcut through the woods because, of course, you never take the shortcut through the woods. But Dr. Kureyan literally throws money at him to take it.
Mhm.
And I'm loving the spooky gothic black and white atmosphere, like the overhanging trees and the fog at night and the wolves like howling in the background. Like all this whole atmosphere that he's set up is great.
Yes, agreed. There's a lot of, like, shots through blackened trees. It's really well done.
Yeah. And then at one point, the coachman even screams out loud, "Ah!" And then we find out that he says a branch reached out to him. It's like, okay. And the doctor's like, "Yeah, put away that vodka, buddy." So they're going through the woods, and of course, one of their wheels on the carriage slips out of its socket, and they both leave the driver to repair the damage himself. And they decide to go investigate a howling sound that's coming from an old ruined chapel nearby. And they're walking through the forest, and they see that the howling sound is just the wind going through the pipes from an old organ. And so what this means is like Dr. Kureyan is a man of science, and so is Dr. Gorovec. And he even says it later on, he's a man of science, but he's starting to doubt. And so they're kind of putting up here that this is science versus what, nature, or science versus monster, science versus the occult, you know?
Against the supernatural. Yeah, we're still not sure what our mythology is. So we're kind of like
Yeah, exactly. So they also discover as they're walking, they see the door to a crypt that's kind of flying open by the wind, and they go down into the crypt, and they discover the witch's coffin in the crypt. Why they would go down these steps below is beyond me. Just maybe wait with the driver, or maybe stay and help, and you guys can get out quicker.
Yeah, I was thinking both like in a horror movie, you absolutely know you should not be doing this, but also maybe I would make the same poor decision.
Yeah, right. Let's go. This is like the reason Jordan Peele is making movies nowadays is because you don't go towards the noise. You know, you stay
We should
away
all
from it.
learn better.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they notice Princess Vija's tomb and notice the glass window, and they look into it and they see the bronze mask, Satan's mask.
Mhm,
And Dr. Kruvian tells the tale of the witch. About 200 years ago, they tried to burn her at the stake, but they couldn't. And so they put her in this tomb with the cross and all that. Then all of a sudden, the driver asks for help. So he sends Gorvik off to help, and Kruvian stays to investigate further. Kruvian is suddenly attacked by a large bat. I've never seen a bat this large in my life. This was like 10 times the normal size of a bat.
it's like a 2 foot, 3 foot wingspan. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
And again, is it a vampire or is it just a bat? Like, who knows?
Mhm.
Um, but he first hits it away with his cane. He's like he must have been a swords person or something before
Yeah.
in another life because he was doing pretty well with his cane. But he then pulls out his strap and shoots it, and then continues to beat it to death with his cane. And while doing so, he accidentally smashes the stone cross that was positioned over the window, and then those fragments from the cross fall down and smash the glass, enabling Kruvian to then pull away the witch's mask. So he's doing too much already. Like he just said the story about the cross stopping her from getting out of the tomb.
Mhm.
Then not only does he break that cross, and the glass breaks, he reaches in and pulls out the mask. Like, what are you doing here? Like
Yeah, it's
he's asking for trouble.
yeah, exactly. Because do you go into the spooky woods when the car breaks down? Yes. Do you go into the ruined chapel? Yes. But why would you disturb the dead? Even if you're not genre savvy enough to know you're in a horror movie, why would you pull the mask off the dead?
Yeah, but he does.
And you have to pry it off too.
And there's the squelching sound effect.
You're
It's
like,
like it's like, okay, that's nasty. I mean, it's 200 years old. She hasn't fully decomposed.
yeah.
It's got. I love that. I wasn't expecting that, and I was watching it with my headphones on because I was watching it on
Mhm.
Xbox, and I just heard like the squelching. I'm like, ugh, oh, I wasn't
Mm,
expecting it.
that was awesome. Yes.
And like I said, her face is sunken in decayed, but it hasn't like fully decayed. It's pretty pretty intact for 200 years old. Although it is covered in scorpions, which I don't fuck with scorpions. My dad was bitten by a scorpion when he was a teenager, and he's told me the story, and it's terrified me ever since.
Yeah, and it's like there's scorpions all over it. Like there's a whole scorpion like colony under that mask. And that there's a couple shots where they always go back to Asa's face as she's getting as she transforms through the movie, but it's just like crawling with scorpions. It's pretty terrifying. And somehow her lips are intact, but her eye sockets are completely empty and full of scorpions.
Yeah, and the worst part is like my sign is Scorpio, so I always think about it, you know. So then the professor also pulls out a small icon. I wasn't sure what to call it. I was calling it an artifact, but then later on in the movie they started calling it an icon. So I was like, okay, fine, it's an
Yeah.
icon. It's an icon with ancient writing on it. It's like a photograph that's covered by two other photographs, and it's like a book. It swings open. You know, I don't know how else to describe it.
Right. Yeah, it's like, and I know it becomes significant later in the movie, and they somehow figure things out from it. But it's like a little paint. Is it a painting of her?
Painting of
It,
her or the saints. Not
yeah,
clear. Not clear.
right. But for some reason, it was buried with her,
Right.
and it's like an instruction manual of
Yeah, an
how to get rid of
instruction how
her.
to exactly. That's pretty nice. I mean, that's pretty helpful.
Yeah.
So then the Dr. Gorvik notices that the professor has cut himself. Gorvik then convinces his friend to leave before the driver becomes overly anxious. But
Mhm.
unbeknownst to both of them, the blood from the small cut on Kurian's hand is already working to revive Aja. So it's like dripping down into her eyes, which is kind of nasty. And we could see like a pool of blood in her eyes already. It's
Yeah.
like it wasn't that much blood, guys. It's like it was a small cut, you know. He doesn't need it. He doesn't require any stitches, but there's a pool of blood in her eyes. But you know,
Say, hey,
well,
Satan will take anything he can get, I guess.
that's
And
true. That is true. Outside the chapel, the two doctors are startled by Princess Katya, again, who is Barbara Steele in dual role, who is the daughter of Prince Vaja, and she has her puppies, her good boys, her two little dogs. And all dogs are puppies to me. So even though these are some big ass Dobermans, they're just puppies.
yes.
Gorvik is immediately smitten with her. He says the sad, seemingly fixed expression she wears tells of an unhappy nature, which is borne out by her saying that the chapel is her father's property and he refuses to fix it up because he thinks it's cursed. So I guess we can talk now about this quote unquote romance that Gorovec
Mhm.
has for Katya. I mean, it is completely surface level. We're not given anything to make us believe that they're together. What did you think of this?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I mean, it's maybe very of the time, and it's also very Gothic trope where two individuals see each other, and she's kind of the doomed damsel, and and he's trying to save her, or or conversely, sometimes it's the other way. It's the doomed, man, and a young woman wants to save him. So it's a very Gothic trope, but she's Katya's not given much personality through the whole movie. She's just kind of desperate and unhappy. She seems much younger, I think, even though she's supposed to be the same age as Asa. They're supposed to be 21. Katya almost seems so young because there's just not much to her. She doesn't get to show any other emotions except for just sadness and kind of disassociation.
And fainting.
And fainting, and she faints all the time. And
Yeah.
I mean, Gore,
Gorvik?
but Gorvik, I mean, eats it up. So I think her desperation and loneliness and kind of need for being taken care of, he is just, it's like catnip to him. He wants to rush in and save her.
Yeah.
But it's not I mean, it's there. It's a Gothic romance. Gothic romance and Gothic horror are buddies. So, you know,
That's true, but even later on in the movie, and we'll get to it, like he was sad about her death, quote unquote, right? But
yeah,
in describing her or talking about what he was sad about, it was just her physical features, right? Because you have
yeah,
nothing else. Like you haven't had a
no,
conversation with her, you know?
no. And he's not just sad. He's like, he's not sure how he's going to go on. And I'm like, I think it's been 2 days.
Yes, he is despondent. Yeah.
He is.
So it's just, yeah, it's comical about that. But like when it comes to Katya, like unfortunately, that it was just of the time that's how they
Hmm.
presented women
Yes.
in literature, perhaps, but more specifically in movies. And like we
Hmm.
see this even like 8 years later with Night of the Living Dead, where Barbara is
Hmm.
basically just one walking pass out. Like she just passed out
Right.
and just catatonic, and it's like, come on, man, it's really disappointing. And the same thing here. So I think that if we didn't have the dual role of like Barbara Steele as Aja,
Hmm.
it would have been really disappointing. But I'm glad that she at least
Yeah.
got to have some fun as Aja.
Right. And it is, she does truly make them different characters. They're not just written differently, but when Barbara Steele plays Katya, she's very demure. She's, very closed into herself. Her body is, it's just very controlled and submissive seeming. Whereas when she's Aja, she is just all over the place. I mean, her face is open and she's, screeching and just and talking, with such boldness. And so it really is impressive how she gave them such very different feels.
Yeah, her performance was top. Oh well, there was.
I
I was gonna say top notch, but like as Aja, there is some delivery that's kind of like questionable, but still all the way fun. And I
Yes,
agree with you 100% that she made the characters distinct enough where you forgot that it was the same woman playing both,
yes.
except in the eyes. You can have her like those eyes, or she has amazing
Oh yeah,
eyes.
an eyeliner on point for both of them.
Exactly. So the men continue their journey, Gorvik noticing that he forgot to put that small icon back from the tomb by accident. So they stop for the night at a small inn, not far from the Vaja estate. Meanwhile, in the castle, Prince Vaja is uneasy as his daughter plays the piano beautifully and his son wipes down a gun a little too much, like obsessively, like for like minutes
Mhm.
at a time, he's just wiping it down. And the prince looks at a. Well, here's another thing that I was kind of unsure about. They call him a prince, but he's like 60 or 70 years old. Like, at what point do you stop becoming a prince and become a king?
Yeah.
Or is that a title that's just given to you and you never really become a king? I was unclear about that.
Well, and I was trying to also make sense of what year we're in. So like Aja was from the 1600s, and then have 200 years passed and we're in the 1800s, or but because the castle itself is still kind of bare and they aren't dressed in like fine clothes really. I mean, it's, and of course the village is still very villagey, it seems
Yeah.
very primitive in some ways, like, and nobody has like electric light or anything like that. So I thought we were maybe in the 1800s.
Yeah, I think so. I think we're like in the
Yeah.
1830s around that time.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess he's still a prince at his age. It's kind of
Yeah.
embarrassing, you know?
And
There's,
not much money. I
yeah,
don't think they have a lot of money. They're
yeah,
not like a rich prince.
there's just no room for advancement in his position. So he
No,
should have
no.
left a while ago. But the prince he's looking at a painting and he says the griffin in that painting is now dead, whereas before it was alive. And then Katya realizes, yes, that was the case as well. But Constantine is like, no, I think you guys are just imagining it. And the
Mhm,
prince sees how much this is bothering Katya, so he says, oh, I was probably just dreaming.
mhm,
But that's also what they do too. They I don't know if it's gaslighting her, but they don't believe her. They don't believe her when she says things, even as Katya. And then later on, like when she sees something in her room, they don't believe her either. And then they drug
mhm.
her, which is
To settle
fucking
her down.
frustrating, But you see
Yeah.
that in movies of this time and also like literature as well, that the crazy woman or the crazy girl who really doesn't know what she's talking about and is mistaken, and it's frustrating to see.
Yeah. At one point, they quiet her down and just say, "Calm yourself, princess." I actually wrote down that line. I was like, "Really?"
I'll be use that line on my wife and see what she says.
Yeah. See how that goes.
So he then sends him off to bed and continues his brooding. He reminds his servant Ivan that this day marks the 200th anniversary of Aja's execution. And then
200. Okay.
he kind of like, it's basically exposition, but it's kind of a
Yeah.
sloppy exposition because we know that that's what he's doing. He says on this same day, every 100 years, mysterious events have happened in the area and the village nearby. Which
Mhm.
it only happened 100. This is the second, so it's not every.
Right.
It's only
It
the second
always
time.
happens.
Yeah, it's only the second time, and technically nothing's happened yet. So, but the prince fears for Katya's safety, particularly since her resemblance to Aja seems to mark her for a very special fate. Ivan puts his master at ease, reminding him that so long as he wears a cross, no harm can befall him. Then he kind of like dismissively says, "Drink your toddy before it gets cold." And I'm like, I'm a grown ass man. I'll drink my cold toddy if I want to. But he goes to take a sip and then he sees the mask of Satan in the drink's reflection, which I thought was really cool. It was really, really nice effect, which they use later on as well.
I thought so too. And he didn't like toss the goblet. I was expecting him to go, ah, and then like throw it, but instead it was more restrained. But also some of the folks, there's a certain amount of just I don't know, classic, classicism here, or maybe just people being I don't know, kind of full of themselves, because at one point the prince like grabs hold of Ivan and is like, "You've served in this house for many years, haven't you?" And I was like, yes, I was born here. I'm like, he's been here his entire life and you don't recognize your manservant yet. It's like, come on, guy. And he's
Yeah,
got his hands on him and he's grabbing at him. And I'm like, come, he just works here, man. Let him go. He's trying to go to bed. Give you your toddy. He's trying to go to bed.
yeah. It's like drink your damn toddy and go away.
Right, exactly. I am off the clock, man.
Yes, exactly. He needs to be unionized or something.
And I think he's the only one in that house. Like,
Right.
there's no other servants. It's like just Ivan keeping them together.
Well, they have one more servant who actually gets killed. He's the driver, which
Oh, yeah, that's right.
yeah,
Boris.
Boris. Yes, exactly.
Yes.
So
Yes.
in the crypt, the witch's body is healing itself. Again, very good practical effects here. We see like the blood, like the eyes forming again, and
Hmm.
all that sort of stuff. Looks great. At the inn, we see guests in revelry, drunk on vodka and song and dance. It just kind of reminded me of the revelry that's happening at the beginning of your story when they're all on Krampusnacht. I was like, oh, that's a kind of a connection there, which I thought was really cool.
Oh,
Uh,
thank you. I didn't make that connection, but yeah, it's kind of that same sense of like they don't know what's going on. Everybody's just having a party.
right. They have no idea how close to danger they really are.
Hmm.
Yeah. So then the doctors are discussing the day, and Gorovec, drunk, goes off to sleep. But before that, he was saying, if I had like two more cups of this vodka, I'd go back to the castle and like talk to the princess, right? But Kurian insists that he goes to bed, so off he goes to bed. And Kurian was actually going to keep drinking, but he's like, no, I'm not going to. Which I think kind of is showing us what kind of a character this man is. Like he doesn't get drunk.
Hmm.
He knows when it's time to stop. He's a man of science, that sort of thing. So instead, he decides to go for a walk. As he's leaving for a walk, the owner of the inn or the tavern, this woman, pulls him aside and like asks him to help parent her child because the child is scared to go out in the night to go milk the cows. And he's like, she mustn't be afraid of the dead. They sleep very soundly.
Hmm.
And off she goes. But she says, tonight I'll do it, but tomorrow I won't. And this, I was like, "Wait, Ma, why are you just pulling some random stranger to like help you parent your child?"
Right, and also like shame your child to the stranger, and also tell a strange man you're sending your teenage girl out alone at night
Oh wow, I hadn't even
while
thought of
he's
that.
leaving. A lot
Yeah,
of
that is really not a good look, Mom.
no, no. But mom seemed really, really frazzled.
Yeah, she was busy dealing with all the drunks in her tavern, right?
Exactly.
But it did kind of remind me a little bit of see, I'm Latino, I'm Mexican, Puerto Rican, and we have something I'm sure you've heard of it called el cucuy. And cucuy is like the boogeyman, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of Latino moms, in order to scare their children into submission, not submission, into being good, would call el cucuy, right? They'd say, "Oh, the
Mm.
cucuy is going to come get you." Or also, like when they see somebody, like if they're at a store and a kid is not acting right, they'll point at a man standing over there and say, "I'm going to say it in. Do you understand Spanish? Or are you okay?"
Not really.
So I'm going to say it in Spanish and I'll say it in English. But they
Yeah.
say, "Ese hombre te va a llevar," and what that means is like that man is going to take you if you're bad. You know, that's something that we say in the Hispanic or the Latino culture just to like
Yeah.
scare kids. So it kind of reminded me of like that is like bringing in strangers in order to like parent your children. It was just kind of fun.
Exactly right. Like, see this stranger you don't even know? Like, I'm gonna take his opinion over yours,
Yeah.
you know? You're scared, but forget that. This guy.
So my question is, why is she milking cows at night? Like, don't they do that in the morning? Like, what's the purpose behind that? Behind that, unless they just really needed milk.
Yeah, I was like, maybe they just have a full house of people, and I don't know,
But like, who's
coffee?
drinking
I
milk at
I
night? I think they're drinking beer and wine and mead.
right.
Maybe it's for the
I
cooking.
don't know.
Who knows?
Yes. But this poor girl, she goes through a lot. Like, she sees some of the significant things in the movie, you know, and she is by having to go out away from the house, she actually is exposed to a lot.
Right, you're right. Yeah, At one point, I was like, when is this gonna? And it's probably in my notes, so I gotta take it out. But I was like,
Yeah.
at what point is her story gonna be resolve itself? Because it just seems like she's at scenes when stuff happens, but we don't know why.
Yeah.
So also, the path to the barn seems to not have been cleared. It's not very effective. Like she literally has to go through very wooded forest to get to the barn, and you would think
Yes.
that they would have cleared a path by now. But frightened, she makes it to the barn. Thankfully, we're hoping nothing
Yeah.
happens to her. Meanwhile, Kruvayan is out for his walk, and he stops by a small pond. While chilling there, he's tossing some detritus into the pond. In the ripples of the water, we get a cool transition to Princess Vaija
Mhm.
as her face, hideously deformed by the spikes from the mask, she fully awakes from her slumber. Using her special powers, she calls her lover, the vampire Javutich, from his grave in the village cemetery. Back in the barn, we see the little girl is right next to the cemetery and Javutich's grave. As thunder and lightning fill the sky, the ancient vampire slowly crawls out of the earth, long nails and looking decrepit, still wearing the mask of Satan. This is an extremely creepy shot, well executed, and again, still effective over 60 years later. Javutich takes his mask off and goes off into the night. What did you think of this look?
I thought it was really well done because there's the all of the people moving in the inn, there's the inn girl kind of running, and then it slows down when you see the grave open, and it just, more and more earth moves away, more and more earth moves away, and then his hand is exposed, and then you see who it is, and it's really well done.
Yeah, it's a great look. It's
Yeah.
really a great look. The I don't know, would it be the costume department or whoever designed it? The design looks great.
Yeah. And he looks, I mean, he is not decomposed, but his skin is mottled, and is uneven, and so he looks dead. He does not look like just a regular man with his mask off.
Yeah, and you don't see a lot of undead with full mustaches. It's just I
Exactly.
found it like I was like questioning. I was, yeah, he's got a full mustache, and you don't really see that very often. So I thought it was kind of cool. But he also has the his face is marked with the holes that were made by the mask of Satan, which looks cool.
Yeah.
So Prince Vaja wakes from his sleep as he hears a terrible wind going through the house, knocking objects down. A hidden chamber behind the fireplace opens, and then Javutich suddenly appears out of the darkness in the prince's room, terrifying him. Javutich advances on the prince, who grabs for the crucifix he keeps by his bedside and puts it in front of him. This terrifies Javutich, who vanishes immediately. The sound wakes the rest of the house, and they come running to the prince's bedroom to ask what the matter is. The prince is unable to speak, so they send Boris, the servant, for the doctors at the inn. And the only reason they know that there are doctors at the inn is because Katya ran into them earlier and they told them that they were staying at that inn. So then there's a great slow motion shot of the coach that's off into the night. And Javutich arrives at the inn and fetches Dr. Kruvayam from the place where he was chilling, which is that small little pond, claiming that the prince has called for a physician. And we're not quite sure what happened to Boris yet. We'll find out later, but
Mhm.
right now that's they've kind of like switched or they've replaced him. And then like you were
Mhm.
saying, the little girl sees this and she sees the doctor go off into the night with Javutich.
And I was actually thinking that was pretty clever for Javutic. In retrospect, when we find out what happened, I was like, because when he comes out from behind the fireplace, he is kind of stalking almost like a zombie, kind of a revenant, kind of. You don't get a sense that he necessarily has his wits about him. But the next thing he's tricking the doctor into getting into the coach. So I was like, oh, it's a much more clever way of thinking. I mean, unless Aja is just kind of giving him ideas from, telepathically controlling him. But I mean, that's kind of like he wouldn't have known about the coach. He must have overheard it. as he was running out of the room, or maybe he was still lurking nearby.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then, upon arrival at the castle, the doctor is led to a downstairs chamber, and Javutic is intentionally kind of losing him to taking turns quickly and walking ahead of him. And then he turns a corner. The doctor turns a corner, comes across the lantern further up ahead, and he walks towards it. But he sees that the lantern that Jakovic was using is now just hanging in midair by itself, and then suddenly falls, smashing on the ground. I thought that was a great effect, really creepy
Mhm.
effect, and I haven't really seen that used in other films very much. I just thought it was really, really a nice touch.
It was one of those, the lights going out and that and kind of you realize he's lost and now there's no light. It's just kind of a little hitch in the chest. Very nicely done.
Yeah. So then he keeps walking, and to his astonishment, the chamber leads directly to the old crypt that he was in earlier. Then he is suddenly locked inside, and he can't go back out. So he looks in the witch's coffin, and her eyes are closed. And then he hears a noise and looks back, and then he looks in the coffin again, and her eyes are wide open, smiling at him. This was creepy as fuck. She looked so fucking creepy at this point.
Absolutely. Yeah. You're just like, yeah. She's awake. She actually has life in her eyes.
Yeah. So then Kruvian's fear turns to hysteria when Princess Aja violently emerges from her coffin, kind of exploding out, and calls out to him. She says, "Kruvian, Kruvian, I've been waiting for you." That sounds terrifying. I would pee my pants. I'd pee my pants just a little bit, just a little pee,
Yeah.
if that happened.
She knows your name.
Yes,
Like,
she knows her name. And how she does, I don't know. Maybe it's through his blood because she was revived by his blood. Who knows?
yeah.
She places him under her power, saying that a few drops of his blood brought her back to life. All of it will give her the strength to accomplish her vengeance. She bites him on the neck and begins to feed off of his blood. And then what I was gonna say is her makeup here, while looks still looks good for the time, wasn't made for high definition because you can see the different color of the molds or whatever the plastic that they used for the makeup. You know.
Yeah, kind of the pock marks from where
Yeah,
the
exactly.
now they're gruesome. They are kind of nicely gruesome, but yeah, that's a little bit obvious under that lighting.
Yeah.
But she has got a great like villain monologue kind of thing in this whole scene. And she's like, "You will be dead, you will be alive in death," and she's, "Come give me all of your blood, my vengeance," and blah blah blah. And she's got some great lines as she's calling to him, and he's just kind of wandering towards her. So it's nicely done.
Yeah, it's like she's a somnambulist or something like that. She's able to
Mm.
make this hypnotize him. Back at the castle, the prince sleeps fitfully. He talks about the griffin and the man in the painting, and his family runs to him and they think him delirious. He says, "Only the crucifix can save us on this day of the damned." Now, here's the thing: it's the morning after, so the day of the damned was before, was before. So but fine, he's an old man and he's losing it or he's cursed or whatever. So
Yeah.
at this time, in walks Kruvian to help him, and the doctor's appearance is changed. His hair is grayer. He's got like a 5 o'clock shadow. He's kind of sunken a little bit. He's not looking good. He has an expression and and an attitude that's much crueler than the previous Kruvian, who was a very nice man. So Kruvian successfully puts the prince into a deep sleep using the same like hypnotism that was used on him. And then he persuades Katya and Constantine to go back to bed for the night. But before that, he persuades them to remove the crucifix from the prince's room. So Kruvian, left alone with the prince, ends up killing the old man and then feeding on his blood. Later in the crypt, Javutic speaks to Princess Vaidya, saying he will bring her the body she needs to fully resurrect herself. He says she is your living image, destined to be sacrificed for her. My question to you is why was he so easily able to resurrect, but not her? right? Like she called him alive, so she has
Mhm.
that power, but she doesn't have the power to resurrect herself. Like he needed blood, right? Because he killed the prince for some blood, and then later he before that he killed the servant. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think about that? Why do you think she wasn't able to fully come back?
I felt the same way because also with Korean came back, and I mean, he's articulate, and I mean, he looks really gaunt and drained, but he's not quite as messed up because I guess maybe he hasn't been in the ground like Juvovich. I just was thinking this is one of those places where the mythology is just kind of muddy, like the rules of the universe. I figure you just kind of have to like go with it because why would he be able to get called from the grave and have his skin all there? I mean, he's kind of messed up, but her body was significantly, you know, he decomposed. Like her eyeballs were empty and stuff like that. So I kind of
Yeah,
thought, I don't know if maybe she was being so close to a crucifix, if she was supposed to, like, that was supposed to have like held her down more than
Juvicic,
Jukovich. I'm saying his name wrong.
Juvicic,
I
yeah,
have it written Juvitich. Okay, and because he was, I mean, ambulatory, and he's like riding a stagecoach,
right,
whereas she was. I mean, as we see later on, her body is still significantly decomposed.
right, right. That was one of the things that made me like confuse me a bit. But again, it doesn't take too much away from the story. You're just like, I
No,
wonder why,
I think it's just kind of those like these aren't your classic vampires or your classic witches or your classic ghosts or whatever. Maybe just under the umbrella of Satan. Satan is
Satan?
somehow embodying me. Satan is
Yeah.
embodying.
The servant hears the puppies barking and they go to check on them. And I was like, oh no, not the puppies, not the
I
doggies.
know.
The next morning, Katya and Constantine are grief stricken when they find that their father is dead, his face horribly disfigured. Finding that Kruvian has disappeared, they send out for Gorovik. Gorovik is at the inn and he's told that the professor was sent for in the middle of the night and that the innkeeper's daughter saw him go in the coach. Gorovik asks for and receives a horse to use to get to the castle. Prince Vaja is not the only person to die mysteriously. That same morning, some village children find the dead body of Boris, the prince's servant, on the riverbank. And he is the servant that was sent to retrieve the doctor last night. So we now know that he was intercepted and that's how he was killed. And then that's how Javutic took the carriage to pick up the doctor.
Right. Once again, the innkeeper's daughter, like having to, because she's the one who is basically finds the corpse with other children. Once she's once again critical to the events of the story.
Yeah, she's like she's moving the plot along.
Mhm.
She's a very good plot device. So when the local people go to see the body, they become convinced that the witch has finally returned from the grave. One of the villagers comments on how the body looks, and another one says, "Can't you see he's dead?" Like that's really what a weird thing to say.
There's a couple, yeah, there's this scene and the very next one. There's a couple things that just kind of made me giggle because you were like, who could have done this? And we're like, he was in a river. That's why he looks all banged up.
Yeah. So meanwhile, Gorovec, having arrived at the castle, is amazed to learn that Kruvayan has disappeared, and he refuses to believe that Kruvayan would have willingly left a sick man unattended. Gorovec examines the prince's dead body and sees two puncture marks on his neck. Of course, Katya faints here, and Gorovec carries her to her room, unbuttoning the top of her blouse, scandalous, and notices the cross she wears around her neck. What do you have to say here, or what did you think about like Katya fainting at the sight of her dead father, who she's already seen?
Yeah, I feel. I'm sorry they wrote Katya that way. It'd be nice if she had a little bit more agency because it seems like things happen to Katya in the story as opposed to her being somebody who affects any sort of change. But I did have to laugh because there's this romance music that kind of plays over every time Gorvik sees Katya. It's just and it's really it shows up like every single time. But the first time we hear that romance music is when Aza is calling Kruvian to her. So that there's like this romance music. And so it just kind of made me giggle that I guess that's their move. Azia and Katya, they have this music that plays over them. And then
Yeah.
of course he had to undo, her shirt. Of course the crucifix is not on the outside of her shirt. So we it's like the only skin we get through, well, except for a painting we see later, but it's like the only skin we get through the movie.
I mean, that's a good point. Did
Yeah.
you at any point feel like the one woman who plays two roles in this
Yeah.
movie was sexualized or seen through like the male gaze?
I think the writing of Katya is very much a classic male gaze, and that her only
Mm,
device
that's
is to
true.
be despondent or to faint. And she always needs a man, whether it be her father or Gorvik, to save her. That's just a very classic trope. But I thought it was. I mean, we'll see a painting later in
Yeah.
which she's naked, and I thought that was a very strange element because um, she's very buttoned up, and even Azza is very high necked. They're not in terribly clean clothing. They're not a sexualized appearance, and yet we do have an image of her as naked later on. So it seemed a little out of character with the rest of the movie.
That's a good point. It literally
Yeah,
could have been anything. It could have been a picture of her fully
yeah,
clothed. Why did it have to be her naked?
yeah. I mean, they do really enjoy the whole hidden passage behind paintings trope, which I personally love. It's very Scooby Doo.
Yeah.
Scooby Doo gets it from Black Sunday,
Yeah.
but yeah, I it was almost like maybe they'd wanted her to be naked, and that either wouldn't make it past censors or wouldn't make it past Barbara Steele. But when you think about Hammer
Right.
Horror and how low cut the clothing became and heaving bosoms and things like that, uh, after 1960, this is very buttoned up. This is, as far as the way she's presented most of the movie.
Yeah. See, and that's a good
Yeah.
question. So you said you were really into, or growing up at least, you were into the Hammer horrors. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm not the biggest Universal horror fan. Neither am
Mm-hmm.
I the biggest like Hammer horror fan. Like I love Christopher Lee and I love all those actors and actresses that appeared in those. But I don't know. It's just something about, maybe I'm not the biggest Gothic horror fan. I'm not sure. But
Mm-hmm.
are there similarities between this movie and Hammer horrors? Like, is this kind of in the same? Because this is Italian and Hammer horror was is British. So, do you see them
Mm-hmm.
as the kind of in the same family?
I feel like the Hammer horror, like you can see Black Sunday and a lot of the elements in the Hammer horror kind of films. It's almost like it's a predecessor or a cousin or something because um, it is one of those where it's not a terribly complex story, and it uses a lot of those classic Gothic tropes of a village and a castle, and we mob with pitchforks later, where it's kind of that bridge between Bela Lugosi and Frankenstein getting into the 1960s and 70s Hammer horror. But Hammer horror, I think, was a lot more I don't want to say jokey,
Uh-huh.
but it became very campy. And I don't think Black Sunday is trying to be campy at all. I think it's taking itself seriously, even though you see some things that are, maybe a little shade campy, or hokey.
Yeah.
Just my opinion. I'm not a historian. I'm just kind of a fan. I have an affection for Hammer horror.
Uh, well, in speaking of like influences or similarities, I did know that. Have you ever seen Francis Ford Coppola's version of Dracula?
Mm-hmm.
So
Bram
I
Stoker's Dracula.
Bram Stoker's Dracula, yeah. I was
Yeah.
trying to remember the name. So Bram Stoker's Dracula. I do know that he modeled some of the scenes from this movie for Bram Stoker's Dracula, and after having seen that recently and then just watching this now, I'm like, I could see that.
Hmm.
I could see that definitely because he was trying to go for a very realistic vibe. Talking about Francis Ford Coppola, he was doing in camera shots, just like Mario Bava was doing in the 60s,
Hmm.
because he wanted to use camera techniques from around that time. And I just thought that was, yeah, I really just enjoy. I don't think enough people talk about Bram Stoker's Dracula. I absolutely love it. It was actually the first episode that I did for the show, and I actually did it with Andrew Hilbert. So it was fun.
Okay. I'll have to listen to that because I am a fan. Um, and I mean, it's pretty faithful to a lot of aspects of the novel, and I'm a fan of the novel. But it, I do. I feel like in Bram Stoker's Dracula, you can see a lot of the previous Dracula films, whether it be camera angles or just a setting or the classic, the stagecoach going through the woods, between villages. And I don't know, those little things give me a little rush of pleasure. I'm not somebody who sees that as, oh my gosh, they're just repeating it. I'm like, no, you're hitting my happy, buttons by showing me something I already love, and you're showing me a new interpretation of it. So I really
Yeah.
enjoyed it.
So I was reading up on this, and there's like the Italian version, which with dialogue in Italian, and
Hmm.
I don't know if this is dubbed. I don't. It didn't look dubbed to me, but it might have been dubbed. But in the
Hmm.
Italian version, they kind of hint at an incestuous relationship
Mm.
between Constantine and Katya. I didn't really pick up on that at all. Did you?
I didn't, but that would remind me a lot of kind of the old House of Usher concept, very Edgar Allan Poe, where brother and sister, adult brother and sister living alone in a mansion. But I did not get any of that from this movie.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't either. So together with Constantine, Gorovec sets out to discover the truth. At the same time, his infatuation with Katya is kind of blooming into a full blown romance. Downstairs in the basement, the local mob has assembled and are describing to Ivan, who's the prince's servant, the state of Boris's dead body, the other servant. And they say that he was consumed by something, his hands clenched, his teeth bared. And Gorvik and Constantine overhear the mob and ask what's going on, and then they tell him. Gorvik then notices the little girl from the inn and says, "Hey, your mom said that you saw the coachman last night." Again, she's like there to help move along the plot, right?
Hmm.
This little girl was actually played by one of the actor's daughters, which is
Oh,
very
that's
fun.
fun.
Yeah. So she says that it wasn't Boris, like who was the coachman who picked him up. It was somebody else, some stranger. And as they're walking out of the castle to go to the village and examine Boris's body, she notices the painting on the wall and says, "That's the man that came to pick up the doctor last night." And everybody's like, "How can that be?
Right.
He's dead and it's been over 200 years."
Yeah. Once again, somebody not believing a female character who says, "This is what happened," and they go, "Stop with your nonsense."
Which the worst part is, it's another female character who does that to the little girl, right?
Right.
Because it's Katya who's like, "How can we listen to this little girl? This man has been dead for over 200 years." But it was a man who wrote the script. So, right.
Women perpetuate the patriarchy just like men,
Yeah.
and all the other genders.
So in the village, talk begins to circulate about the return of the witch Asa and her vampire lover. Gorvek examines Boris's body and notices the same wounds on his neck as the prince had, the same disfigured face. He says that he's a man of science, but he's starting to question it, and he seeks the counsel of the
Hmm.
local parish priest, who, first of all, has a really bad beard, really bad stage beard.
Can I say he's
Yes.
referred to as Prince Terrible Beard in my notes?
It's a very bad beard.
It is.
I think they spent the budget on like the transformation of Princess Aja back to life, and they're like, "Fuck,
Yes.
we ran out of money for his beard," and like, "I just use whatever you got." Like at that
Yeah.
point, just don't wear a beard, you know.
Right, right. But instead, and it's also a wig too. It's kind of this
In a
whole,
wig,
it's like
yes,
they got that faux fur and they just kind of glued it to his face.
yes, exactly. They didn't try to blend it in or make it look. natural
Mm-mm.
or anything. Oh, and speaking of, I know you said the wig. Uh, so Barbara Steele was actually wearing a wig in the movie as well, and she actually, I
Okay.
should have mentioned this earlier. She had a bit of a contemptuous relationship with Bava, and part of it she
Mm.
later on in life chalked up to possibly not speaking Italian, a language barrier. But at times she would they would fight because she thought that she didn't feel comfortable with the amount of skin that he wanted her to show, and
Mm.
so she kind of like refused to bear like cleavage in the way that he wanted her to. So I know we were talking earlier about that, so possibly the reason why we don't see her sexualized in the movie is because Barbara Steele put down her feet and was like, no, I'm not going to do that, which is really
Yeah.
cool to see for her to do that in 1960.
Yeah, I imagine she really had to step up and do that, and though now it makes me wonder if that painting isn't like revenge porn, like, he's like, "Fine, I won't you won't show skin, but I am gonna have these long lingering shots on somebody who's painted to look exactly like you, and they're gonna be stark naked." I kind of wonder, because if she would, maybe you don't have to agree to that if it's your depiction. That's really interesting.
And now that makes me feel icky about about that, and I don't like it.
I don't know anything about Mario Bava as a person, but I imagine there were lots of problematic directors now, because there certainly are now. I mean, back then, and so now there are as well. And so, yeah, if they were fighting over her showing skin, then he probably was difficult to work with in that aspect.
Yeah, and I mean, I would not put it past any man in this era, any director in this era, or even, I mean, we hear stories about horrible directors in the 80s and 90s, like it's still happening
Mhm.
to do this sort of thing. And so, it sucks that she had to be put in that position, but I'm happy that she was able to stand up for herself and do all that sort of stuff. And some people, some actresses do stand up for themselves, but because they do, they lose their roles or something like that. They say,
Mhm.
"Fine, you won't do it. I'll find somebody else who will." So it's just a tragic thing in Hollywood, and this was in Hollywood, but in films in general. And so the patriarchy
Pretty
strikes
amazing. Exactly. Once again, the
again.
patriarchy
Yeah,
ruining the party.
yeah. So he says he's a man of science, but he does seek the counsel of the parish priest with the terrible beard, who assures the young man that such creatures do exist, vampires he's talking about.
Mhm.
In the castle, the hidden door behind the fireplace opens up, and Kruvian and Javutic emerge, Javutic ordering the doctor to go into the castle as the scene dissolves. In her room, the princess gets ready for bed, but she sees a black gloved hand emerging from behind the curtains. She yells and runs out, and the rest of the house comes to help her. Gorvik runs and asks what happened, and she tells them about the hand, but again, they don't believe her. And of course, they run to get her the sedative, which is what we talked about earlier, which is just terrible. Like, and they drugged her without her consent, you know?
Right. But it is a common trope of Gothic literature as well as movies that were kind of set in this era too. So not that I think, and probably was historically accurate to some extent.
Right. Yeah,
But
exactly.
it's interesting to look at it with today's eyes and today's perceptions and think, and you're like, man, just they were like they said, calm yourself, princess.
Have we passed that part yet? Is this where it happens?
This might be the calm yourself, princess scene, which Gorvik tells her, and she does pipe down.
So, as Gorbich runs down the hall into his room, we see that Dr. Kuvian is hiding behind his door. And he kind of slowly closes it. And Gorovec looks behind him and he sees the doctor and he's terrified. He says, "What happened to you?" But all that Dr. Kuvian will say is he says to leave and not to get involved with things that don't concern you. Then Dr. Gorovec shows him the icon from the coffin, and this causes the doctor to flee the room and disappear into the castle. Gorovec then comes across the bodies of the poor puppies who have been bled to death, and he says he suspects who did it, which he suspects the doctor of doing it. Gorovec, Constantine, and the father then discuss the icon, and the father asks to borrow it so that he can decipher the old glyphs. Gorvik goes to comfort the princess as she is crestfallen, saying that her life is abandoned, riding away here. And this is kind of like their only like interaction where the princess actually reciprocates some of the love or some of
Mhm.
the affection that Gorvik has for her. And like you said, it's one of those gothic romances where they're immediately star-crossed lovers and like the two people who have been the most in love ever in the world, you know.
And the music, that music is playing again, that, you know, that heavy romance music. And it's a great scene in that it kind of does these lingering shots over like fountains and, you know, greenery, and it looks very lush, you know, and she's kind of the despondent princess who's out on a balcony wearing all black, and you know, it has a lot of effect to it. It suddenly is a gothic romance for a couple minutes.
Yeah. And he professes his love for her, asking her to run
Hmm.
away with him, but she says she cannot. He tells her not to give in to despair, and then she begs for his help and like kind of weeps in his arms. And he actually refers to her by her name and not her title, and he apologizes for doing so because he kind of forgets his place that she is a princess.
Hmm.
Back in the castle, a candle sets fire to a tapestry, which Ivan, the servant, puts out. But as he does, he notices that there's a secret entrance that's hidden behind it. And so he goes and tells Constantine, and Constantine goes in. And when he does, the secret entrance behind the fireplace, just to the left of this entrance, opens up. And so then Constantine and Gorovec go in, but they tell Ivan to stay behind to make sure that they're not locked in. And almost as soon
Hmm.
as they enter, hands are seen coming from off screen behind Ivan, holding a rope, and then they strangles him to death as the hidden door slams shut. So Ivan did not do a good job. It's so hard to find
Poor
good help
Ivan.
these days.
Yes, and that's the entire servant population of the castle now.
Yes, now everybody is gone. So inside the hidden area, they come across the painting, I should say, of a naked woman who looks just like Princess Vaja. But
Hmm.
behind the painting, they find a corridor that leads them to the crypt. Again, like you're saying, they love a hidden, they love a hidden door. They love like stuff hidden behind paintings. Like I've always wanted a house with a safe hidden behind a painting. I think that'd be so
Yes.
fun, you know?
Oh yeah, if I had a castle, this would be the way to do it, because this is like a hidden passage inside the hidden passage.
Right, right. It's like three layers of security there. That's funny.
Can I ask, so so getting past the painting might be revenge porn now that we know the history of the movie, but like the very fact that there is a, you know, very very large naked painting of what who used to be the main princess, you know, I know at the very beginning they kind of accuse her, when they're accusing her and they're about to put the mask on her, they accuse her of basically being evil and worshiping the devil, but also that she's kind of lived this life of sin. Do you think it was supposed to be that, you know, one of the things she would do that was sinful would be like laying around naked? I mean, sitting for this painting or standing for
Mm,
this painting. You know, it's because we really don't get evidence aside from her declaring that she follows Satan. We don't see any evidence of what this lifestyle was that made the village finally and her brother rise up against her. Um,
right. You're right.
was she supposed to be lewd and, you know, and kind of a loose, you know, with loose morals? Because it really is strange that they just have this naked painting buried in the castle.
Right. And I would think
And
that perhaps in if we were to have a prequel of this movie, which I think would be awesome because we
that
would
would
get to
be
see
very good.
more Princess Aja, like perhaps she hid her lover in the castle,
Mm-hmm.
and that was their like their room where they lived, or you know, stuff like that. And so
Oh,
perhaps that was the only place she can go to be her true self, then worship Satan. And maybe that's maybe he was a painter and he painted that painting of her and she put it up there. And Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we could
Her
speculate.
her and Juvitich doing, like, that's, like, their special little love nest.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And maybe they found her, and that's why they found her out. Maybe that's why they killed her. You know,
Yeah.
who knows? Like honestly, in those days, if you were a woman on a period, you would be a witch, right?
Yeah.
And they'd
Yeah.
accuse you of being so, and they'd burn you at the stake, or they'd hang you, or they'd throw you in the river. And if you drowned, well, you weren't a witch. But if you did drown, then or if you floated, you were a witch. So
Yeah. If you actually survived, you were a
yeah,
witch.
exactly. Behind the painting, they find a corridor that leads them to the crypt. They then find the body of the long dead witch vampire, Princess Aja.
Mhm.
Gorvik realizes what's happening and runs off to get to the priest, and he yells to Constantine to warn the others in the castle. Constantine finds that he's locked in, and suddenly Javutic appears in the painting and advances on him, causing him to fall down a pit that has opened up behind him. And they don't really explain it, but I was reading up on it, and apparently at the bottom of the pit are stakes, right?
Oh, so
And
he fell onto one of
he
those
fell on one of the, and then
things.
later on in the movie, the pit comes back again, and so that's why I'm mentioning it here. Gorvik and the priest go to the old cemetery where Javutic is reputed to be buried, only to discover his half-buried coffin and Kruvian lying asleep in it. The priest places his crucifix on the forehead of Kruvian, which causes it to burn the flesh, which again is a really cool scene.
Mhm.
The priest says the inscription describes the inscription in the icon describes how to kill the monster. So they're basically instructions, which is great, really convenient.
Yeah.
And he slays Kruvian by driving a wooden stake into his right eye. Again, not consistent with any vampire lore that we know of.
Mm-mm.
As far as I'm aware, have you heard of this method of killing vampires before?
No, that's almost like a zombie kind of,
Through the
destroy the
head.
brain
Well,
kind of
yeah,
thing. Yeah, so that's, we're in Russia. It's things work a little bit different there.
yeah. So now we got witch, vampire, zombies, and ghosts.
Right.
This is a great movie.
It is. And that's the thing. It's like it's a great movie. Don't worry about it. It's a
Yeah,
lot of don't worry about it.
exactly. So then the father says the witch caused Kruvian to become a slave to the devil, and that she can return if she had a body to switch with. Which I don't know how he knew that, but
Hmm.
maybe it was in the instructions. Who knows? But
Right.
Gorvik then realizes that Katya is in danger and hurries back to the castle to see if Katya is all right. At the castle, after having murdered both Ivan and then Constantine with little difficulty, Katya is all alone in the castle with Javutic. As she is running through the castle looking for anyone, she comes across the body of Ivan hanging from the ceiling, dead. Finally, she goes to her father's body to pray for help from him, and then the prince rises up from it as a vampire and advances toward her. He says, "I am no longer your father. Your blood is no longer my blood." So first, two questions here. One, we've already talked about it a little bit, but how did you feel about her just like running around the castle looking for help and then going to her dead father like to pray for help?
Yeah, like I said, Katya, she really doesn't have a whole lot of. She isn't given a whole lot of skills on how to handle anything, and so she doesn't. She's not your final girl who's okay. Fine, I need to fortify myself and fight off whatever is happening. She just kind of loses it a bit. Now, gorgeous, like running from kind of open window, balcony, whatever those kind of that terrace place was. So that was good. And I thought running to her father was very sweet. Like if you're at your end of your rope. Um,
Okay,
so,
I see
and
that.
it's nice that he explains to her what's happening. It's like I'm a monster now. It's nice that he kind of gives her that context.
Yes,
But
that's
she
true.
doesn't have a whole lot of skills.
So, so then Javutic shows up and hurls the undead prince into the fireplace where he burns to death. So if you're going to kill the prince so quickly, why even use him? I guess he needed his blood, but he could have grabbed anybody's blood. I don't know. This
Yeah.
surprised me that he just dispatched of the prince so quickly after turning him.
I yeah, I wasn't sure if it was because like, at first, I thought maybe because the dad did explain to her what was happening, but, again, I'm not sure how, like, clever like, these monsters seem very clever, they're making plans, they're making decisions, they're not just mindless blood-sucking machines, and they're not just Oz's thralls. Um, so that's the only thing I could think of is that he killed him because he was a liability. But still great practical effects. That whole melting head in the fireplace thing, which I guess is another way you can kill them.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Which stake
exactly.
through the eye and burning their head is will work.
Yeah, they kind of failed to mention that in the instructions, right? Or maybe they just had to flip it over or something, or an asterisk or something. But so then Javutic then grabs Katya and takes her down into the crypt where Asha is waiting for them. And Asha is still very weak and in need of more blood. And she grabs Katya and begins to feed off of her. And it is Asha's intention to murder Katya and assume her identity in the process. But she doesn't feed off of her, more like feeds off of her energy, right? Like she puts her hand on her and just is like drawing her life force, sucking it out of her. So it's like more of an energy vampire now.
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure because blood woke her up and blood restored her body, but somehow there's this idea that maybe this is her curse. Maybe it was the curse that her made Katya, like she kept saying, you're destined to kind of be the one who gives me this final energy. Like your destiny is to let me live again. So maybe that's why they have a different power transfer. Um, but yeah, it's definitely different than any of the other kills we've seen the vampires do.
Yeah.
So,
Have you seen What We Do in the Dark?
oh, what we do in the
What
shadows.
We Do in Shadow, sorry. Yeah, have you
Yeah.
seen that?
Yes. And the energy vampire is
Yeah, and the energy
brilliant.
vampire, that's what was drawing me towards.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was pretty funny there. So then Gorvik finally arrives at the castle and he scales the wall because he can't get in. I thought this is that dude is in love, right?
Yeah.
And he's scaling the wall to enter through a window, and he runs throughout the house yelling her name, which frightens Javutic away or makes Javutic go chase after him in the castle. In the meantime, Katya's body is still laying next to Princess Ajaz, and she's draining her life force away. And Katya's face starts to look like grow older as the princess's
Mm-hmm.
becomes younger, or as Ajaz's face becomes younger. And then finally, the witch is basically back to life. The witch mocks Katya, saying that if he had gone with Gorvik and left when he wanted to, you would have been saved. That love could have saved you. But she didn't because she's always felt that there was something else that she had to do with her life. And she's saying that you
Mm-hmm.
were meant to be sacrificed for me.
Yeah, which is that I guess Katya, like she used to be scared of that painting, she said, of the one that looks like not the naked one, but the one that was in her dad's room that looked like her, and said, I'm even afraid to go near it. So I guess that's the curse that when they were burning her or they tried to burn her and they gave her the mask where she cursed everyone. That's where she set up that Katya would someday have to, I don't know, give her a body again.
Right.
So, can you talk to me about the in camera work you said about those transformations? Because it's really effective, like the changing of her face.
Yeah. So what they would do is they would just take multiple images on top of one image, and it would be basically transitioning from the normal face into the disfigured or gaunt face. And they would do
Mm-hmm.
something like that, like in the early movies of like the turn of the century, like the 18th to 19th century. And they also did it with like in Lon Chaney with his Wolfman sort of transformation, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the same. It's the same style that they were doing here.
Oh,
Yeah. So it was not like, it's, I guess it's special effects, but it's special effects in camera or in film, right? They would
Okay.
they would layer one piece of film on top of the other, basically to get that effect.
It's done really well here. Like Lon Chaney's Wolfman is almost like little jumps, of fur on his face. But this, it appeared to me very smooth. The and you see it a few times in the movie where people are being transformed, kind of as you watch.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
They do a great job of it. So Gorvik then comes across Javutic, and they kind of brawl for a while. It's just a fight, like just
Like
two
all over the
dudes.
place.
Yeah, knocking things down, rolling around on the floor, stuff like that. And eventually, Gorvik kills the vampire by throwing him down that same trap door in the floor. That's when we find out that there's, well, we don't find out, but from what I've read, that there's stakes at the bottom of that trapdoor, I should say. So he pulls out, but and then in the same, like after the vampire falls down, he then pulls out Constantine, and we see on
Mhm.
Constantine's back there's blood on it from the spikes. So I guess that's how we can figure out visually
Oh, okay.
what it was. And Constantine says to forget about him and to go save Katya.
Do you think Constantine dies?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Okay.
There's no way he lived. I think the only reason we saw him there was because we needed an end to that character, right?
Mhm.
Because otherwise, the last time we would have saw him, he fell down a hole, and that's it. That's not a good way to end a character, right?
Right, right.
So there's like, fuck, we got to resolve that storyline real quick. So then Gorvik makes his way into the crypt, interrupting Aja's rejuvenation. However, he believes the witch's claim that Katya, who is lying unconscious in the coffin, is actually the witch because of her pale and old appearance. As Gorvik prepares to drive a wooden stake into her heart, he suddenly notices. So, first of all, here's the other thing. He found out that you're supposed to impale them in the eye, but he's now
Right.
doing it in the heart. So,
And nobody has said the word vampire since the opening narration, right? Like, I don't think they're calling these people that are running around trying to kill them vampires.
the father did say it when they were in the
Oh,
chapel
okay.
that the vampires do exist.
Okay.
But then he went
Okay.
on to say that the way to kill him is the stake through the eye.
Right.
So anyway, so he's preparing to drive the wooden stake into her heart. He suddenly notices that the body that he assumes to be the witch is wearing Katya's crucifix necklace, something impossible for evil entity to wear since it would be burning. It would be burning them. He places the crucifix on her head and it does not burn. So then
Mhm.
immediately Gorvik turns around to Asha and tears away her robe, revealing that her body is still undeveloped underneath. And it's a putrid mass of flesh and exposed bone. And it looks really fucking cool.
It does. This was probably my favorite reveal that we got because it's not. It's her face was marked with the mask, so it looked kind of unearthly white and with pock marks on it. But that chest is a whole skeleton chest. I thought it was just really well done.
And I don't know how they did it. I wonder if the face was superimposed. I have to go back. I should have paused it, but I was so like into the story at this point because it's kind of going fast now.
Yeah.
We've gone through the slow part and now it's picked up speed like a motherfucker. And so I didn't go back, and I should have paused it, but you see her face and then the robe and then the body. So
Yeah.
they did it somehow. And it's a good enough effect where you're not like, oh, I know exactly how they did it, you know?
Right. And somehow it's just like ripped apart. Like I was like, was she not like somehow it just opens? Yeah, because
Mhm.
you get a whole reveal of, and there is no like the only flesh is like the what's inside the ribs. It's like really good.
Yeah. So she says, I am not your love. There she lies, dead forever. My vengeance is complete. All her family is destroyed. All. Great, great line. Like, amazing.
Oz's lines are great. She's like the joy and beauty of hating and blah, and I was just like, yeah, you go, girl.
Yeah. So then she tries to hypnotize him by having him look into her eyes. But just then the priest arrives with a mob of townfolk, and they grab Asha and they take her outside and they tie her up to the stake and finally get to set her on fire. And she burns to death, or she is burning to death. Gorvik is despondent, believing Katya to be dead. He prays and asks the priest why this could happen. And the priest says 200 years ago, they weren't able to burn her to death, but they shall do so tonight. Gorvik says that his life is broken. He will not find a way to move on. Her beauty and her body, that's all he talks about. And like to me, it's such a dumb love story. I know you're saying it's a gothic love story and that's
Yeah.
typical of it, but for me, I'm like, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. And then we
Yeah.
see Aja screaming at the stake, and as the witch finally dies, Katya arises, her life energy restored, and then Gorovec grabs her by the face and brings her close to him, and just saying her name over and over again, and he kisses her, and the music swells as we see the fire raging, and the mob exclaims in joy and revelry. Then the end. So what did you think of this ending here? Like where she comes back to life and like he kisses her and he's like despondent about her death, all that sort of stuff. What did you think?
Oh, it's hard to go from, crazy Aza with her skeleton chest and declaring about, because she keeps just talking about the beauty of hate and the joy of hate. And she's just, I mean, she is not trying to pretend like she's a good person. She is like completely in the like, I hate you all. My vengeance is complete. It's very hard to go from her doing that to Katya survived, yay! And I mean it's very sweet, but man, Aja is just wonderful to watch. And even when they have her up on like that kind of pyre, it's like above the pyre, this like wooden ladder thing. She's way above the flames. So I guess the flames are supposed to go up to meet her or something. She's even still given the crazy eyes of just like, like, I still won in the end, even though I'm being overtaken. So and that was very sweet. I thought it was very typical of what a gothic wrap up is, which is that the young lovers have vanquished the evil and they will now be able to, go on unencumbered by all of this. But man, Aja, if it was a movie today, I feel like they wouldn't show you that Aja died. Like you would wonder if there'd be a sequel from
Mm,
this ending.
yeah.
So what did you think? Did you like the ending?
So it was very abrupt ending, which is typical of movies at
Yeah.
this time. Like if this like you were saying, if this movie would have been made in the 80s or 90s, we would have had a wrap up with an ambulance and like a crane shot of them pulling away as they're putting a blanket over her and she survived, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But so it's an abrupt ending, but I don't know. It felt to me like Katya has just survived this horrible experience. She's gone through literally life and death. She's come back from death. And then in her face is this dude trying to give her a kiss. It's like,
Exactly.
chill, man, get the
Perfect
fuck off
point.
of her, you know?
Yes.
Let
And her
her,
whole family's dead. Like her dad just died and
yeah,
then was resurrected as a vampire next to her. She's been through some traumatic events in the last 24 hours.
yeah. That's like, and the only reason that she felt similar or even had any affection towards you because you were helping her in a situation. That's not to say that that's going to translate
Yeah,
into romantic affection for you or anything like that. Like,
right.
I don't know. It felt like he was being a nice guy, sort of thing. And like he felt that he deserved a kiss at the end for helping her
Hmm.
and all that stuff. I don't know. I just didn't like that part of it. I loved Aja's character, Princess Aja. Like I
Hmm.
love her character, and I wish she would have survived. Like you were saying, I wish it would have been left a little bit more to the viewer to see what happened. That
Hmm.
sort of thing. But overall, I think it was. I don't think there could have been any other ending, especially for this time, like this era.
Yeah.
But I think it was fine. It's not my favorite, but it was fine.
Yeah.
But so then that's the end of Black Sunday. So overall, Victoria, what did you think of the movie?
I really, really enjoyed this movie. Like I figured I would like it for the subject matter and the era, but I actually really truly enjoyed it as a story, and Aja's character just makes it. So I definitely enjoyed it.
Yeah, I thought as a first time directorial debut for Mario Bava, like I think this was really good. Really showed that he had some experience and practice before as a cinematographer and all the other projects that he'd done before this one, and he'd also stepped in a couple projects that he was a cinematographer on, and then the directors quit, and so he stepped in
Mm,
uncredited and finished the movies. And so this was like his first solo movie, and I think he did a really good job with it. Any of the problems that I had with the movie were in the script, in the story, not so
mhm,
much in the direction of the movie. I thought the direction of the movie was fantastic. I thought the cinematography was amazing. I thought the special effects were really good, especially for the time, and that they still hold up now. A lot of younger people, like I can say, I'm almost 40 years old, and I sound like an old man now, but my nephew and my nieces and nephews, they're like in their 20s or late teens, and
mhm.
they love horror movies, but they have a problem getting into older movies just because the effects are cheesy, or that it's not quote unquote unscary, or it's not scary. And so when I'm looking at a movie, I'm looking at it through my lens, but also in the lens of whether or not the younger generation would like the movie. And I think that there's enough in here where they could definitely like the movie. The special effects don't take away from it at all. It adds to it. Storyline is a classic storyline. I think overall, I really really enjoyed this movie. What
Yeah.
were what were some of your favorite parts of it? Like, as a writer, what did you feel about the
Mhm.
story? How did you feel about it?
I feel it felt very much the homage to a classic Gothic horror, um, Gothic romance. One of the things that Gothic horror does too is, and that this is a twist on, is that you think something supernatural is happening, but it's not. It's somebody plotting against you, or it's your imagination, or it's the crazy woman in the attic. It's unreliable narrator kind of stuff. And this is truly opens with supernatural. You get a sense for Aja from the very beginning. I think that makes it really effective. Um, and as a story element, I think by starting so strong like that, it makes you engaged. Like, you want to see Aja come back because of how the story presents her at the beginning. So I really enjoyed that. And, I meet it where it's coming from, because it is a Gothic horror, Gothic romance thing. I'm not expecting it to be Nope. I'm enjoying that old way of creating a story.
Yeah. Although, like, it seemed like we didn't like we talked about, we didn't know if it was vampire or witch or ghost or even zombies at the end there. I like that that was left because when you see a vampire movie nowadays, you know exactly what it is. Light's gonna burn
Hmm.
them, stake in the heart, they drink blood. Like, you know the formula. Here, it felt like he was just mixing and matching whatever he wanted to do, you know, which was great. I really appreciated that, and they actually fit Barbara Steele and another one of the characters. I'm forgetting who right now, but they fit them for Fangs. And
Mm.
but then at the last minute, Bava decided not to go with it. But you could still see it in some of the publicity stills for the movies. You'll see Barbara Steele with fangs on it. But I like that they didn't go that route. And then, as far as the story was concerned, I know we talked about it a little bit, but it was based on Nikolai Gogol's short story V, on which the film's plot and characters are based. And he recounted that he often used to read the story to his children, and that the tale scared them so much they insisted on sleeping in bed with them, with the parents.
Hmm.
And so he admired the horror elements of V. So when given the chance to choose material for his first film to direct, he immediately selected this one to make the film.
That's a great backstory. And it's this is one of those stories where, Aja they're not trying to redeem her. She's just being bad. She's just a bad element. And I know that sometimes we can get a lot of emotion out of a story where you redeem, or you at least make a villain more complex. But she's just worshiping Satan and loving the power it gives her. And there's something that makes that really fun, and also terrifying, because there's no way to you're never going to be able to talk your way out of it with that kind of villain.
Yeah, and I think they did an amazing job casting Barbara Steele. Barbara Steele was so good in this movie.
Hmm.
She accepted the role because there was a major actor strike in the U.S. and it prevented anyone from accepting roles
Mm.
there. And then this ended up kickstarting her career in horror. She ended up doing a lot of horror movies which in the end she professed to not having really been a fan of the genre. So I always thought that was
Hmm.
funny. But she's primarily known as a horror actress, right?
Yes.
But she was obviously in Black Sunday. She was in the Pit and the Pendulum. She was in the horrible Dr. Hickok, other horror films. So she became known as that. But she was also in the movie Eight and a Half, which was
Mm.
Federico Fellini's one of his great masterpieces. So she had range, and I think that
Hmm.
shows in her portrayal of both roles in this movie.
Yes, I think you can definitely tell that she is an accomplished actress and she gives her all. I mean, she says some outlandish lines of, declaring herself evil that, um, you're not going to find in a non-horror movie, and she just gives it her all. I mean, you totally believe her character.
Yeah. So I guess that brings us to our ratings. And what we do here is we typically rate movies on five upside down crosses. So what would you give Black Sunday? How many upside down crosses would you give Black Sunday?
Oh, this is so hard. I mean, it's nearly perfect for what it is. It really is pretty delightful. But I'm going to give it a four upside down black crosses. But it's pretty darn awesome.
Okay, four out of five upside down crosses. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. I am gonna give it. I see. I'm struggling between ratings right now, but I had a lot of fun talking with you about it, and I think
Hmm.
that added to my enjoyment of the movie. So I was at a 3.5, but I think I'm going to go four with you as well. I'm going to give it
Okay.
four upside down crosses just because it was so much fun to talk about. It's so much fun to watch. Like with everything I've already said before, the effects, the camera work, the direction, Barbara Steele. I mean, just really good movie. If you haven't seen this, well, thanks for listening if you haven't seen this already. But yeah, I would definitely recommend watching it. And this is one of those movies that I want to rewatch again because I went a decade without watching this one.
Hmm.
I don't tend to rewatch a lot of movies, but this one would definitely go on my rotation.
And this is one that, as we've talked about it, I really would love to see a sequel or a prequel. Like a
Yes.
prequel would be great, like what the origin story was. But a sequel, it's really actually, we never see her dead. And we know that Katya, obviously, the assumption is she married Gorvik and the family continued. So somewhere there's still some Vajos over there. Like you could have a present day Black Sunday, I think, and really do a lot with it.
So you're going to write the script.
So
Uh,
who has these rights
yeah.
now?
Okay, great. So, Victoria, in order to be fully absolved of your horror movie sin, I will be suggesting three movies to you to watch, and then you can watch those, or if not, you'll probably burn in the fiery pits of hell. I don't know. That's up to me. That's not up to me. That's up to you. And so, the first movie I would suggest to you would be another Mario Bava directed movie from 1971 called The Bay of Blood, which is Giallo, which I
Okay.
absolutely love Giallo. I'm not sure how you feel about Giallo, but it's one of my favorite genres.
Mm.
The next one is another Bava because I'm really starting to enjoy Bava. And it was Lisa and the Devil from 1974.
Okay.
And then there's another, we're going to stay in Italy with another one from 1973. I'm a huge 70s fan, so I apologize if you can hear my voice. I feel like I'm losing it right now. So it's called
Mhm.
Horror Rises from the Tomb.
That
So
sounds amazing.
those are the three movies that I would recommend to you. So hopefully you get a chance to watch those, and next time, if you want to come on again in the future, we can talk about those or another movie. Thank you, Victoria, so much for coming on to the show. I really appreciate it. I hope you had some fun.
Oh, I had a great time. Thanks so much for having me on and also just sharing such a great movie with me.
Yeah, I'm glad you liked it. I'm glad that you picked one. Oh, I guess real quick, what do you know why you picked this one out of the list? Was it just because it was black and white and you like gothic horror, that sort of stuff?
It was. It's because I knew I really enjoyed some of this, and again, I've seen her face. I've seen Aja's face. I feel like in horror literature my whole life, and I just have never watched her this movie, and so I figured it was about time.
Nice. Okay, so if you can let my listeners know how they could follow you, how they can purchase your books, how they could support you in any way.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so my website is victorianations.com. That's got all of my books that I have been in that you can purchase, and some for pre-order. I would especially love it if you pre-ordered Mother's Tales of Love and Terror. Right now, they've got a deal going on at Weird Little Worlds that if you order it now, you'll get it in October, which is earlier than the April release date. And it's got an amazing collection of authors that are contributing to it. And then you can follow me on Twitter or Instagram at leaves_cobwebs, or just search by my name and you'll find me.
I love that name, by the way. That's a great name. And if you'd like to follow me, you can follow me on Instagram at the My Horror Confessional. You can follow me on Twitter at MHCPod. If you'd like to email the show, you can email me at myhorrorconfessional@gmail.com. The music was done by Taylor Fox. You can follow her on Instagram at the Taylor Fox. The art was done by my friend Captain Mikey. You can follow him on Instagram at Captain_Mikey_art. That's the show. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you once again, Victoria, for being on.
Thank you, Miguel.